we're just going to take a moment while everybody is hopping on. So if you don't mind just bearing with us for just a few moments, we appreciate it. Okay, all right, I think we're ready. So hello everyone again. Welcome to Inclusivity Matters. I am Coley Calabro and I work at SareptaCircle, and I'm pleased to be your co-host today in this discussion. I want to, of course, thank Dr. Truba for joining us today and to share your wisdom, as well as Diane for you here today to share your experiences for the SareptaCircle event. Both are being compensated by Sarepta Therapeutics for their time with us today. As a reminder, today's information is going to be shared for educational purposes only. It is not intended for medical advice. Of course, for that medical advice, we always direct you back to your healthcare team. Additionally, we will not be sharing any information today on specific products, clinical trials, or studies that are being run by Sarepta. For that, we also direct you back to your healthcare team as well as clinicaltrials.gov. We're excited to have this 25-minute conversation together today, and we will be taking questions throughout. Of course, we have a few that have been submitted ahead, but we really want you to be engaged in the discussion. So as you have questions pop up, pop those in the chat, please send them our way. We'll try to get to whatever questions we can. If not, we will definitely look to respond to you after the event. We always encourage you to stay connected and be able to share. That way we can share updated information, future programming, and resources. So please, at the end, we're going to offer an opportunity on a QR code for you to easily scan, fill out a quick form to do that. So please take advantage of that. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Truba, who will get us started.
Hello and welcome. Thank you, Coley. My name is Dr. Natalie Truba, and I'm a clinical psychologist with specialized training in pediatric psychology. In my role, I work directly with families impacted by rare disease, many of whom are living with Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. Diane, can you also introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Diane. I live in Baltimore, Maryland with my husband and our son, Joshua, who's 22 and lives with Duchenne. I recently retired after a 20-plus year of teaching. I now work for Joshua as his home health aide, administrative assistant, wheelchair Uber. I wear many hats.
Welcome, Diane. Well, we're going to get started. So I'm going to begin by telling you guys a little bit about our discussion today. And really, we're going to be focusing on inclusion, and inclusion being important for every human because we all benefit from being included in groups. And being included when you are living with Duchenne can be a lot more difficult because of barriers such as mobility. For example, if your child's friends are going out someplace and they want your child to come and they invite them, it's hard for your child to just kind of jump in that car, right? If they have a really heavy wheelchair and there's not a place to put that wheelchair, way to get into that vehicle safely. So you just have to think about these things a lot more. If there's a sleepover at a friend's house, you have to think, is this house accessible? Or if there's a basketball game and your child wants to go to the basketball game, you're thinking, are they going to be able to be in the stands with their friends? Are they going to be on the gym floor when everyone else is in the stands? Like, how are we going to navigate that? So there's just a lot more complexities of social planning to help your child, grow rich social life. And these are the barriers sort of that lead to exclusion rather than inclusion. And without inclusion, our children are going to miss out on opportunities that they need to connect and to make friends and to grow as humans and as healthy humans. And this creates isolation. And we just don't do well as humans with isolation because we are socially connected beings who just really need to be connected with others. We need to be included. We need to be close physical proximity as well with humans. It's just really important that we have aspects of that and space for that in our life, even if it's not all the time. And so fortunately, when we are adopting a problem-solving mindset, we're able to sort of help children, especially those with medical complexity, sort of address inclusion, challenges that kind of impact inclusion or feeling included. And so having a problem-solving mindset also means that we're accepting your child's reality, we're acknowledging the frustration that comes with that reality, and we're facing problems rather than avoiding them so that we can help that child develop a skill set to navigate issues of inclusion as well as other issues, but today we're focusing on inclusion. And so with this problem-solving mindset that we're going to talk about today, almost every difficult situation becomes something that we can solve, we can conquer, we can learn to manage or navigate it rather than avoid it or not do it, right? Or limit ourselves in what we get to experience in life. And so these are all the topics we're going to touch on today. as we discuss 3 specific tips to help you improve your child's inclusion in everyday life and activities. So we're gonna get started with talking about our first tip, and our first tip is support your child's interests. What I'd like to get across with this tip is that it's important to make a genuine effort to get to know your child's interests so that you can facilitate their inclusion in those interests. Talk to them about what appeals to them. Are they into music? Is it art? Are they into design or building or architecture? Do they like gaming? Are they like a card Pokemon, sort of player? Do they like sports, right? Is it something totally different, something else entirely? And as you're exploring these interests alongside them, I want to really encourage you to be creative and to start thinking outside the box about how they're going to participate in the things that interest them, not just when they're younger, but as they age and develop. Like, how do we cultivate interests that aren't more narrow-minded when we are interested in something? So for example, if your child likes sports, but doesn't have the mobility to play certain sports, there might be other options, right? There might be adaptive sports that are less hard on their body, right? Or that help permit them to kind of, do activities in a way that's safe for them. Or maybe they get into other aspects of sports altogether, like coaching or announcing or keeping data, those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, you're really just more likely to find solutions if you approach these challenges with a creative, problem-solving mindset. Another thing to remember is that if you need assistance from others so your child can participate in an activity, you can ask for help, and your child can ask for help. And what you'll find a lot of the times anyways, is that when you put yourself out there and you're asking for help, people are going to surprise you, and they're willing to sort of do what they can do creatively to make things happen, right? Because they want people to be interested in the things they're interested in. So this is really a place where having a problem-solving mindset comes in really handy, right? Because people want to help, they don't know how. And you can help solve this as parents, as caregivers, by telling them and helping your child develop the skill set to tell people exactly what they need to do to help them. Because like I was saying, when people are really passionate about something, they want to show other people and experience that with them. And so bringing people in that are the experts in that, and the things your kid is interested in, will give you so much more richness in helping, think through, how do we modify this so that my child can participate and be included. Diane, I'm wondering if any of the things I'm suggesting or talking about sort of rings true to you, and how you yourself and your husband have supported Joshua's interest in inclusion and activities he's enjoys as, he's aged and developed.
Yeah, it does ring true, Natalie. My husband and I were always very intentional about noticing what got Josh excited and what he was interested in, and he was always interested in music. So right from elementary school, we tried to get him involved in any sort of chorus or musical activities that they offered. And we did this by reaching out to the leaders of those groups well in advance so that we could meet at a time that was convenient for everyone and talk about the different things that he needed based on the disabilities that he had to overcome. So it was things like if he's up on stage seated in a chair, he needs a stool under his feet because his feet don't touch the ground and they'd be, just kind of hanging there. And he, if he had to go up the stairs to get up on stage, there had to be someone there to help him get up the stairs and down the stairs safely. And the people that we talked to, you're right, they were always very willing to help. And we were proactive and collaborative, but we always made sure that the person running the activity was the one that was in charge of the activity. And we just listened and understood what needed to happen. And then we provided suggestions as to how Joshua could do that with just some assistance here and there. And it really, really made a difference. They felt good about having someone participate that had physical challenges and they weren't afraid of it. So it worked really well.
That's a great example, because it shows that problem solving sort of mindset for inclusion, Diane, but also kind of shows like the collaboration between you and the other adults and your son to kind of make something like that kind of happen, so that it felt good for him too, right? Like he felt wanted in that space. And I'm sure the chorus director and the students appreciated that as well, because sometimes it's hard to think through, how to do that, if you don't live that life. And I think the most important part is Joshua was able to do something that mattered to him, right? Because you were proactive and thoughtful. So I love that example. Let's pause for questions for a moment. Coley, do you have anything for us in the question submissions?
All right, yeah, no, great. So I do think we do have a question that pertains to this topic here. Here is one that says, my son spends a lot of time doing electronic gaming. Would it be better for him to be doing less gaming and more inclusive in-person activities? Maybe Natalie, you could help us address this one?
Sure. I get this question a lot from families living with Duchenne. Parents say to me a lot, all my child wants to do is game. They don't want to do anything else. It's hard for me to get them, interested in other things. And when I talk to the kids about it, though, I often discover they have like an incredibly rich social gaming life that the parents just either don't know about or they don't fully appreciate as a meaningful social life. But really, they are socializing, they're connecting with others. They have people that they would consider very good friends who they talk with and share things with in these spaces. And they feel very included because a lot of the barriers are kind of mitigated, right? That they normally have to navigate in the everyday real world out here. But we often dismiss this, parents dismiss this, providers dismiss this, us adults or us older adults kind of dismiss this as not having the same value. And I think without taking a genuine interest in it, you don't necessarily understand it and the role it might serve, the function it might serve, and that we can be a bit judgy about it, right? I'm not saying kids can live their entire life online, because it is really important, as I was saying earlier, for physical proximity and the sense of feeling connected with people. They do need friends in real life. They need to learn there's social skills that go into real world, to relationships. And they, need to be included in those spaces in order to develop those skill sets. And so I think it's fair as a parent to put limits on aspects of, how much we live in a social gaming world versus a social real world, so that we're encouraging that as cultivation of other interests, but we don't want to do it at the expense of that, right? Like, so there's a space for both. And I think taking interest in that and helping your kid bridge, what is it about that world and that space that is so meaningful, and how do we help get those sort of things and experiences here in a shared, not real world space, I think is really important.
I agree, Natalie. My son Joshua has many social relationships that he's formed through his YouTube channel, where he reviews music and people reach out because they share the same interest, and he has those online interactions and relationships with them that are really important. But we make sure that he has and establishes and maintains in-person relationships wherever he can. But I think in combination, that online presence and that in-person can create quite a rich social environment for them.
I really agree. And it's more, you just have to be a little bit more thoughtful, right? I'm sure you would echo that, Diane. Well, we're going to move on to our second tip. And our second tip here is work with your child's school on intentional inclusion. And so we're going to start this discussion off with this tip by kind of talking about intentional inclusion, what that is. And when we're talking about intentional inclusion, we're talking about intentionally including someone in a group or activity by deliberately taking steps to make sure that they can participate. Okay, so it's an active process. Tends to work best when there is a culture of inclusion kind of established, where that's the focus. The expectation is that we're being inclusive. So you're constantly thinking about how everyone in a group can be included or will be included in something. In a school or a classroom, intentional inclusion might mean normalizing the idea that members of the group have to be thoughtful about how everyone in the group can participate. So we're kind of talking about those elephants that sometimes people try to minimize, right? Doesn't mean that we're ignoring those differences that we might have with each other, but acknowledging things like, oh, I'm in a wheelchair, or I'm wearing glasses, or, I might, so-and-so might not, be able to use their hands as easily as somebody else. And so how do we take those things, normalize them, and then take group sort of collective action to kind of problem solve, like, how are we going to make sure everyone can do this activity, knowing that these individuals have these things that we have to be thoughtful of. And so intentional inclusion is really going to happen, more organically in some schools where that's the culture off the get. And then other schools, you might have to be very actively involved as a parent or a caregiver to make things happen for your child. And so if that's the case in your child's school, I recommend really aligning with the teachers, your healthcare providers, your professionals, your child and your child's aides to help facilitate this, because it can be a big overhaul. If it's not the culture of the school, it can be kind of a shift in how they function. And it does take more work, right? And there is a burden of load to that for teachers and the people that are tasked with kind of managing that in the classroom. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't ask for it, right? And so one of the things we can do is go into your child's classroom, talk with your children's peers about Duchenne. Like, what is Duchenne? Read books to them about it. Help them understand what Duchenne is and how it affects the muscles. And if your child's open to it, you know, they can talk about Duchenne with their class themselves, right? Especially if they're old enough and at a place where they can probably do that without, you know, significant distress or hardship. Because at the end of the day, we have to recognize it's hard for a lot of people, let alone children, to wrap their heads around Duchenne and what that means. And so they just might not understand why, you know, your child can walk and, you know, walk this day when we're doing this, but then can't walk at different time. When you're maybe going there or going a longer distance. So when you explain these things in an age appropriate language, you know, children's peers groups, their teachers will have a better understanding of how to sort of intentionally help include them in activities as they better understand like what sort of needs there are that they maybe need to be thinking of. Have you ever had to do something like that for Joshua, Diane?
Yes, for sure. When Joshua was young in elementary school, at the beginning of the year, I would meet with the teacher and offer to come in and talk to the students. And as he got older, Joshua could speak for himself, but as in those young early years, he needed a little bit of support there. So I would go in and Joshua would know I was coming in and why I was coming in. And he would go with his aide to do something else while I was there. So I wasn't talking about him while he was sitting in the room. And that helped a lot. I would talk to the students at their level. I mostly would answer their questions. They always had lots of questions. And I would explain why he's smaller than other kids and maybe moves a little slower or needs just a little bit more time to, you know, get up off the floor or whatever it is that they're doing. He just does it a little bit slower. I made sure I explained that he wasn't sick, that he had a condition that he's lived with his whole life, and he understands what he can do and can't do, but he can play with you. He can do the things that you do, just on a different way. And I made him understand they're not going to hurt him by including him in the activities, that it would help, and he can be included as much as possible. They would, you know, they really took the information in really well. And when you say it on their level and don't overwhelm them, it works well. It was usually a 10 to 15 minute conversation. And I found that the kids really enjoyed it and they learned a lot, and it helped Joshua and the teachers and everyone in the classroom. I discovered children's ability to adapt and be welcoming and accepting of difference is really high. They just need to know what's going on. So I just took advantage of that and went in and talked to him.
Yeah, I really agree with you on that. I think children can be just so welcoming, especially when they get a really good explanation and have adults who model acceptance, right? And so, you know, kids by and large tend to want to play and be welcoming of other kids as long as they know how to do that. I'm wondering what sort of experience you and Joshua maybe had with intentional inclusion as he got older, and how you sort of made sure he was included in activities that he enjoyed as like once he was out of elementary school.
Sure. Joshua, as all kids do with disabilities, had an individualized education plan or an IEP, and he needed assistance moving from one classroom to another, and that was all covered in his IEP. But sometimes I had to negotiate with the staff where they thought something would be easier for them, but not necessarily better for Joshua. When he was in middle school, all he needed was a transport chair. He just couldn't walk that long distances between classes. But once he got into the classroom, he could sit at a regular desk. He could move around the classroom like the rest of the students. So, you know, I kind of had to push for the transport chair that someone, you know, his aide would have to push and get him there, over like a scooter. Even though some school members thought, well, a scooter would be better, he'd have more independence and get himself there. But we talked with his healthcare provider, included the care provider with us, and they agreed that he shouldn't really have something that's motorized that does the work for him until that's what he actually needs, because the less he does, the less he will do. So we really tried to work with the school. And, I think the biggest advice I can give to parents is, you know what's best for your child. Stand firm, and the school will eventually give you what you need, and your child will benefit from it. And you need to, on another level, you need to know your rights. You need to know that you are in charge of your child's education, and the school is there as your collaborator and assistant, but ultimately the decision is yours. So just follow through on what it is that you need and advocate for your child. And your child will see that, and they will learn as they grow to advocate for themselves.
Yes, very much agreed. I think their point about educating yourself about your rights and your child's rights to education is incredibly important, because there are a lot of protections for people that need supports at school. And so being educated about that is really helpful. What about sort of like extracurricular activities, Diane? Like how did you make sure, intentional inclusion was occurring, like outside of the classroom, outside of, academics?
Sure. Joshua participated in theater and chorus his junior and senior year. These were activities that happened, some of it during the school day, but a lot of it outside of the school day and outside of school hours. So it was considered an extracurricular activity. And theater especially was an incredibly positive experience for him. His teacher was all about getting him involved, so the collaboration came easy. She was willing to do whatever was necessary. She said if he needs a wheelchair on stage, we'll get his wheelchair up on stage, and we can rearrange the scene for however's needed. The students were absolutely phenomenal. I think the kids were really the key to what a positive experience it was for him, because they were willing to do whatever was necessary to keep him fully involved. One example that I remember is he was in musical theater, and they did a Disney show where they got to pick their own groups to perform with, or they could perform alone, and they got to choose their song, and it was all student led. And Joshua wanted to be a leader of a group. He wanted to do the Hakuna Matata song from The Lion King, and he got together a group of other guys. I believe there was like 7 or 8 of them, but he advocated for himself. He found those group members and said, this is the song I want to do. Do you guys want to do it with me? And they were all about it. And they really let him lead that song. They choreographed it around Joshua. So instead of him having to dance around, he was kind of in the center singing, and they danced around him. And it was just, every time I think about it, it gets me emotional, because it was so good and so fun. And you could just see in his face the joy that he was included, but also that he was just one of the guys. He was just like everybody else. And when you have a child with disabilities, that's really all you want. So it was great, and they really showed me what was possible. So that was huge.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Dan. I think it speaks to like the amount of sort of bravery that you guys have faced too, and you're kind of like, we're just gonna figure it out, right? Like we'll come away, we'll work with these adults, and we're gonna trust the power of kids being awesome, and people just sort of prove goodness in themselves, right? Like that's such a good example. And I agree. I think, when we allow ourselves to kind of take those chances, right, we can really benefit in some really rich ways that we really wouldn't if we allowed ourselves to remain fearful and not take those risks. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on to our last but not least sort of tip. Our third tip is going to be help your child develop their own self-advocacy, inclusion skills. Self-advocacy is such an important inclusion skill set for individuals living with Duchenne. When a child, an adolescent, a young adult speaks up for themselves and advocates for themselves, they can be more independent. They're going to be more independent, and they're going to be much more likely to get their inclusion needs met. What do they need to be included? Those things are more likely to get addressed. And so it's really important to start teaching those skills those self-advocacy skills at a really young age, right? So that you can develop those skills, you can practice them, you can allow space for sort of failing or learning, as we would say, right? So that they get comfortable advocating for themselves without you as you get older, right? Because it is a skill set. It's a skill set that's best done kind of gradually and increasing the ante over time. And as a parent or caregiver, you're gonna, you have the power to teach your child about self-advocacy very intentionally and from a lens of patience, right? And to allow that patience and that for that process to kind of happen. Because it does take time, right? And you're going to be able to recognize that it takes time and meet your child where they're at and really scaffold the needs that they, where their needs are, where their skill deficits are in relation to who they are as a human, right? And what's going to work best for them, because what works for one kid isn't maybe going to work for another kid. So, and I get, it's hard for some kids. It's harder than it is for other kids. And, but unfortunately, if you have a child who's, bad at math, we don't say, well, I guess you're not going to do math anymore, right? We're just going to let you escape and avoid math forever because it's hard for you and you don't like it. No, we make them do more math, right? And we work on getting comfortable with that skill set. Then we kind of expand it, and we really want to like push them into math a bit more so that we're working through that, because that's how learning works, right? Learning doesn't work if we avoid it. We can only lean in an approach in order to learn. So you help them practice not only asking for what they want, but speaking up, actually saying the words to get their needs known, and you'll help them with the consequences and understanding the consequences of not speaking up, right? Those are also valuable learning opportunities. And if they have a difficult experience because they didn't advocate for themselves, now you have an opportunity to talk that through. What could they have done to make the situation better? What could they have done to avoid this consequence they're experiencing now, so that they can have a better outcome next time and they can kind of make a different choice, because they know, well, I might not want to do this now, but I really want to avoid that other thing. So I'm going to, make myself do this thing now. And you really want to resist that temptation to rescue your kids when they struggle, because if you always do that, they're just not going to learn to self-advocate. And I see this a lot. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You mean well, you want to protect your kids and keep them safe. And I get that. And that is hard to accept as a parent, that I have to let my kid feel distress and to have some hard times in order to learn. But the reality of life is that your child is going to have experiences when they're disappointed, when they do their best and it doesn't work out. And we can't shield them from that. Sometimes we actually have to allow that to happen in order for them to learn and grow in the ways that we want them to learn and grow. So I'm wondering, Dan, if you would be willing to kind of share an experience or tell us about experience of where you've had to help Joshua actually learn to sort of advocate for himself to be included in a situation or in an activity or in a space.
Sure. I couldn't agree more with what you said about not rescuing your child, and you really do have that desire to rescue them. And sometimes you do, and you learn that you should let them advocate. We always made it clear to Joshua that he needs to tell people what he needs from them. They don't know. And if they don't understand, then try to explain it in a different way. Don't give up. Don't stop asking for help because they don't understand the first time. We had to work with this with his aides at school. He often had different aides, sometimes day to day, week to week, year to year. You never knew. So we taught him how to share with them what he needed and to kind of train them. Like, this is me, and these are the things that I need. And he would learn that if he didn't tell them, they didn't know. So I think his biggest challenge was advocacy with other kids. They, at the high school level, kids just invite each other to do things. Hey, you want to come over? We're meeting here. Do you want to come join us? And Joshua would always be hesitant to respond because he was like, I don't know if there would be a bathroom that would be accessible. I don't know if there's stairs. Like, there would be all kinds of things that would concern him. So we would problem solve together, and we would go through, could he tell them that he can't do stairs and ask them if they have a bathroom on the first floor? We could go to where they were going to meet, and we could check it out and help him problem solve that before he was there with the other kids. So I helped him, but when he was in the situation, he was helping himself. We just tried to talk through, what questions could you ask? How could you find out? Could you invite them over to our house? And I'd always say, why don't you try to work this out with your friend first? I was willing to call a parent, but I really tried to avoid that. I tried to get Joshua to do that on his own. And now that he's older, he's good at talking to people about what he needs and setting up social engagements. And we all know as adults, it's hard to maintain social relationships, even if you're completely able-bodied. So having him work through those things, sometimes I have to give him a nudge and say, have you reached out to someone this week? Set something up. And I've taught him to ask people for help. They're more than happy to help him. But I reminded him that he won't, if they don't know what to do, then they can't do that for him. So it was really important that he talk to people and share what he needs.
Yes, thank you so much, Diane. That is another great example, and kind of shows too, like over time, like how you've shifted and kind of encouraged him in his own to kind of manage a little bit or take a little bit more of that responsibility on. So, thank you for sharing that example. Maybe right now makes sense to pause for another question, Coley, if we have any in.
Yeah, I think we have a really good question, and I think this goes to kind of, again, that nudge and that encouragement. And Diane, maybe you can help us with this. What can you do when your child is reluctant to self-advocate because they're really just uncomfortable speaking up?
Sorry about that. That is difficult. And I do think it's hard to get them to advocate for themselves if they're shy and are uncomfortable with that. With Joshua, I reminded him that sometimes in life we have to do things that are hard and things that we don't want to do, but it's necessary for us to get where we want to be and do the things we want to do. So I reminded him that the consequences of choosing not to advocate for himself would be he'd miss out on things that he might have enjoyed. We've tried to raise Joshua with the mindset that if something needs to be done, you just need to work your way through it. That there's usually a solution and you can find it if you're willing to problem solve with everyone involved. And if it doesn't work out, well, you have to accept that sometimes things don't work out. And that's okay. It's something that everyone goes through, and it's part of just living life, that not everything works out the way you want.
I think that's such a powerful and good approach to take. Diane, thank you for sharing that perspective, because I think that's a really important perspective to have, especially when you have a lot of challenges in life, and sometimes no matter how hard you work, those challenges still sort of impact you, right? And with that, we are gonna wind down our program, but before we do, I want to review our tips. Our first tip was support your child's interests. Our second tip was work with your child's school on intentional inclusion. And our third tip was help your child develop their own self-advocacy inclusion skills. I know that we shared a lot of information with you today, and we hope you found it useful. I wanted to offer Diane the opportunity to provide some final words of wisdom with all of you before we finish up. I'm sure you have a whole bunch, Diane, but lay it on us.
Okay. I would say when it comes to taking action to make sure your child gets what they need, is to advocate for your child, and knowing when to step in and when to let them advocate for themselves can be difficult. But I think if you just follow your gut, you usually know. You can tell when your child's ready to just jump in there and take care of it themselves. And if you can't, they will tell you. They're usually pretty good at letting you know. It can also be difficult to negotiate with school staff when they push back on things. But I would tell you, as a former teacher, genuinely schools want to help. They want to do what's right for your child, and sometimes they don't know what that is. So you're there to help them understand what that is, as well as your child is. My advice is do your best. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. You learn from them and you move forward, because the challenges don't stop. It's a lifelong journey for sure.
Yeah, that learning from your mistakes, right? That's good advice for all of us, right? And no matter what challenges we face, we're either winning or learning, right? And we always want to kind of set ourselves up to fail forward, right? So we want to always be making sure that we're staying on that trajectory of learning, right? Like want to learn from things, even if it didn't work out in our favor. So Diane, thank you so much for this conversation today. I found this really rich, and I hope that our audience did it as well. I appreciate the experience you bring and the wisdom that you bring to the table here, and it's just really wonderful to have an opportunity to discuss important topics with you and other members of the Duchenne community. I'm going to hand it back over to Coley, who will wrap up our program today.
Thanks so much to the both of you. Dr. Truba, I know that the attendees that joined us today have taken so much from these tips, and of course, Diane, just your willingness to share your experiences and some of the anecdotes of how you and Josh have teamed up in this journey together. I know I get so much out of these conversations, and I'm sure that others are as well, and maybe others that would want to join future conversations. So we do just want to offer a quick reminder to stay connected to us if you're not already doing so. And to do that, you can go to Duchenne.com and fill out a quick form, or of course, scan the QR code that's on the screen. We've provided a couple of ways for you to do that today. Please do share this information with others that could benefit. And as always, we look forward to seeing you all in future conversations. So thanks again for hopping on, and we hope you all have a wonderful day.